Hello everyone, welcome to the third Rural Suffolk podcast and the first of this year. I know there has been quite a gap between the podcasts. I think my last podcast was just before Christmas when I was wishing everyone a happy Christmas. Obviously events have moved on since then in personal life, and obviously we all know what's going on at the moment. So what have I been doing since January? Well, I've started a new course at university and I've been busy at work. And then obviously there's the homeschooling and the childminding and all the challenges to be brought by the lockdown. But hopefully the end is in sight now, and in the next month or so we will start to get back to normal. So here we are. February brings the rain and thaws the frozen lake again, in the words of the poem by Sarah Coleridge. So I suppose we can look at the news and look at entertainment now, and the big story is the Dig, the new film starring Ralph Fiennes. I must confess I haven't seen it yet. I've been a little too busy to sit down and watch anything at the moment, but my wife has seen it. She says it's very good, so it's something I'm looking forward to sitting down and watching as soon as life allows me, as soon as my children allow me, as soon as work allows me, as soon as the university allows me. It's something I'm going to sit down and enjoy entirely in my own time when I've got nothing else to worry about. So just thinking about the film and reading about it and seeing what people have said so far, indeed seeing what people on the rural East Suffolk and rural West Suffolk groups have said so far, is that they've been very interested in the way that the Suffolk dialect has now come back into focus. Obviously, Ralph Fiennes had to be taught the Suffolk dialect, and apparently, by all accounts, he's done a very good job of it. So I thought what we'd do today is we'd talk a little, or I'd read you a little, about the Suffolk dialect. And I am fortunate enough to have a copy of a 2-volume book called The Vocabulary of East Anglia. It was written by a fellow named Robert Forby, and it dates from 1830. So what I propose to do is I'm going to read you a few extracts, a few words from this dictionary. Obviously, it's a very long dictionary, and reading the dictionary is about as interesting as it sounds, so I won't read the entire dictionary. But what I've done is I've picked out a few words and phrases and examples of the vocabulary of East Anglia, and obviously we're talking about Suffolk, Norfolk, and the parts of Cambridgeshire, especially the Isle of Ely, classical East Anglia, parts of Essex too, of course. And so what I propose to do is I propose to read you a few words, read something from this book, and yes, I hope you'll find it as fascinating as I did. So we will start with the letter A and with a word that everybody will know, about. And so I'm quoting directly from the text by Robert Forby here. About. This sense is, of course, in the dictionary, but there is a particular East Anglian mode of using the word in conjunction with a pronoun, which is not common. For example, is the horse worth £40? Nothing about it. Is he a mile off? No, nor about it. About £40 and about a mile are phrases common enough, but in those now quoted, the prep near would certainly be used. B. To bab. Bab. To fish in a simple and inartificial manner by throwing into the water a bait on a line with a small piece of lead to sink it, lifting it up from time to time and dropping it again. Eels are thus taken in the fens and crabs on the sea coast. It is the same as bob, which is defined as a term in angling. Our babbing differs from angling. Neither floats, pole, nor hook are necessary to it, though one or more of them are occasionally used. Bandy hosho is a game at ball played with a bandy, either made of some very tough wood, or shod with metal, or with the point of the horn or the hoof of some animal. The ball is a knob or gnarl from the trunk of a tree, carefully formed into a globular shape. The adverse parties strive to beat it with their bandies through one or other of the goals, placed at proper distances. It is probably named from the supposed resemblance of the lower end of the bandy in strength or curvature to a horseshoe, or it may be so called from being shod, as it were, with horn or hoof. In particular, the empty hoof of a sheep or calf, which is frequently used, may be well assimilated to a shoe. What is a bandy? Well, should have said that first, shouldn't I? But a bandy, the curved stick with which the ball is struck at sundry games. 2. Any game so played is called by the general name. Some are distinguished by appropriate additions. 3. A hare from the curvature of her hind legs. Bandy wicket, the game of cricket. Of the several games at ball played with a bandy, that in which a ball is aimed by one player at a wicket defended by the adversary with his bandy must be allowed to be very appropriately called bandy wicket. Now an infamous one coming up, a bang. Bang, a cheese made in Suffolk of milk several times skimmed, therefore very hard and tough, and with which a hard knock or bang might be given. For some reason it is otherwise called Suffolk thump, or it may have obtained both those names in another circumstance, that when it is dry, knock as hard as you will, you can make no impression on it. And I should add that Suffolk cheese is widely, or was widely considered in Victorian times to be some of the worst cheese in the Isles, in the nation. Bangled. When cocked hats were worn, one of the sides was sometimes let down to protect the face of the wearer. The hat was said to be bangled. It is even now said of a round hat with a broad and loose brim, such as is worn by Quakers, or of late by dandies. The same name is also applied to the young shoots, or more particularly the broad leaves of plants, when they droop under heavy rain or strong sunshine. Bargain. An indefinite number or quantity of anything, not necessarily conveying the idea of purchase and sale. For example, 2 good tidy bargains of hay from an acre, meaning something less than wagon loads. A poor bargain of wool from 60 hoggets, a sad bargain of lazy chaps. Barley bird. The barley bird is the nightingale, which comes to us in the season of sowing barley. To lovers of natural history, it is highly interesting and amusing to mark the coincidences of the arrival or departure of migratory birds with the germination, foliation, inflorescence, or maturation of vegetables. It may even be useful to some purposes of husbandry. This name of the sweet bird of night could have originated only in such a habit of observation, and amongst who? Even simple rustics, for neither gentlefolks nor persons of science were ever known to call the nightingale the barley bird. Barnacles, spectacles, which before the invention of springs were made to keep their proper position before the eyes by simply pinching the nose, like the instrument used by farriers to make a horse stand still, and commonly called barnacles. The word was certainly in use 200 years ago, so we're looking then in time of James I, I think, 1630s. Barrow pig, the least pig of the litter, or the runt of the litter. The pitman has the same meaning, and perhaps is more general. A barrow pig may also refer to a gelded pig. A bay, the space in a building between 2 main beams. We speak of a barn or a cart lodge of so many bays. Sometimes, but not so correctly, the whole space between the threshing floor and the end of the barn is so called. Shakespeare applies the word to a house. In Measure for Measure, the clown talks of houses being let at so much a bay. Beastlings, the first milk drawn after the cow has calved. Proper food for the little beast. A beastling pudding is thought superior to one made of common milk. Beggar's velvet, the lightest particles of down shaken from a feather bed and left by a housemaid to collect under the bed till it covers the floor for want of due sweeping, and she gets a scolding from her dame. Beggary, the copious and various growth of weeds in the field of the slothful, the urendophilics of neglected lands. The very best are apt to be overrun with beggary for lack of sufficient ploughing, hoeing, and hand weeding. Begone, decayed, worn out, sufficiently recognised to be woe begone and wasted with misery. Being. We have a particular use of this word, much like the construction of the ablative absolute in Latin, where the substantive is represented by a clause of the sentence. For example, I could not meet you yesterday, being I was ill in bed. Or ill abed, as I should have said. So, be like. Be like. To speak accurately, this word in the first sense must lead in the sentence, and be followed by the potential form of a verb. For example, be like we may have snow tonight. In the second sense, it must follow and the verb must be indicative. For example, I hear Mr. A is to be married to Miss B. Aye, so be like. Bell sola, the loft on which the ringers stand. Ben joltrum, brown bread soaked in skimmed milk, the ploughboy's usual breakfast served in a capacious wooden bowl. It may perhaps be mere farmhouse slang, yet, as there must be some ground even for the most licentious and arbitrary fabrications, we may be allowed to imagine one in this case, and it might not be altogether absurd to conjecture that in the first part of this strange word an obscure allusion is intended to Benjamin's sevenfold mess, and that the latter part was meant to express the joltering of the flatulent mixture in the stomach of the young rustic when he resumes his labours in the field after swallowing it. Bents, dry stalks of grass remaining in pastures after summer feeding. A besser bedlam, a sort of vagrant very common in this country 30 or 40 years ago, but now very nearly, if not quite extinct, either from the greater efficiency of the vagrant laws, the stricter administration of them, or the diminished credulity of the public. They were wont to announce themselves as inmates of bedlam, allowed in some lucid interval to range the country and return at a stated time to their confinement. They talked in a wild, incoherent manner, were great annoyances to everybody, objects of great terror to many, and from the general wish to be rid of them as soon as possible, were likely to collect considerable contributions. There were, in Shakespeare's time, those who spoke of bedlam beggars with their roaring voices. The name is not yet obsolete. Any female maniac, or any whose dress, manners, and language are wild, disorderly, and incoherent, is still called a besser bedlam. Bishop Barnaby, the pretty insect more generally called the ladybird, or maybug. It is one of those few highly favoured among God's harmless creatures, which superstition protects from wanton injury. Some obscurity seems to hang over this popular name of it. It has certainly no more relation to the companion of St. Paul than to drunken Barnaby, though some seem to have supposed it has. It is sometimes called Bishop Benaby, which may possibly have been intended to mean the blessed bee, sometimes Bishop Benetry, of which it seems not possible to make anything. The name has most probably been derived from the barn bishop, whether in scorn of that silly and profane mockery, or in pious commemoration of it, must depend on the time of its adoption, before or since the Reformation, and it is not worth inquiring. The two words are transposed, and be annexed, as being perhaps thought more seemly in such a connection than fly, bug, or beetle. The dignified ecclesiastics in ancient times wore brilliant mixtures of colours in their habits. Bishops had scarlet and black, as this insect has on its wing covers. Some remains of the finery of the gravest personages still exist in our academical robes of ceremony. There is something inconsistent with the popish, episcopal character in the childish rhyme with which Bishop Barnaby is thrown up and dismissed when he happens to light on anyone's hand. Unluckily the words are not recollected, nor at present recoverable, but the purport of them is to admonish him to fly home and take care of his wife and children, for that his house is on fire. Perhaps, indeed, the rhyme has been fabricated long since the name by someone who did not think of such niceties. Bitch, the female companion of a vagrant. Ray has a tinker's bitch. Our tinkers do not keep bitches but trulls. The fiddling vagabond with us is the only one who has such an establishment, and we found upon it an extremely coarse and offensive comparison, as drunk as a fiddler's bitch. Blame, to blame, a very decent and commendable evasion of the horrible word damn. For example, blame me, or I will be blamed if, etc. It is to be observed, however, that the use of it is altogether selfish, confined to the first person singular, Nobody ever heard so mild an imprecation as blame you for a rascal, or John Smith be blamed for a fool. Blind. Abortive. When blossoms fade away without forming the fruit, we say they are blind. It seems to be particularly said of strawberries and other small summer fruits. The process of vegetation is stopped. It should rather be considered as a participle from the Saxon word blinen. An English verb blind would come quite regularly, the passage of which would be blind. Blind sim or blind hob, the game of blind man's buff. The unfortunate wight whose lot it is to be hoodwinked, and who is thumped and punched by the other players, bears the contemptuous name of a coarse clown, to make fun for the company, as in a pantomime. Blinked beer. Skinner and after him others say that sour beer is so called. It may be so, but not by us. The beer which we call blinked has no acidity, but an ill flavour peculiar to itself, said to be occasioned by too long delay of fermentation, until the wort is too cool to ferment with proper activity. Others account for it from insufficient stirring of the mash, so as not to wet all the malt. In either case, carelessness or laziness is implied. Either reason, therefore, agrees better with Skinner's etymology than our own, according to which the liquor is intended to be sour. Blinked beer will, of course, have a great tendency to turn sour, but certainly in our usage is blinked before it is sour. A block horse, a strong wooden frame with 4 handles, commonly called a hand barrow, for the purposes of carrying blocks. Bloodolf, the bullfinch. The first part of the name is from the colour of its breast and belly. We have neither elp nor nope, but our name is probably a variation of the former. We call the greenfinch the greenolf. Blouse, a woman with hair or headdress loose and disordered, or decorated with vulgar finery, whether she be ruddy and fat-faced, or at all like a blossom, is nothing to us, though she is so represented. 2. A woman's bonnet, most properly that sort which is otherwise called a slouch, but it seems to be applied to bonnets of all shapes, fashions, and dimensions, from the beehive to the crow's nest. For example, I will just slip on my blouse and go with you directly. Blousy, tricked out in flaring finery, loosely and carelessly disposed. It is not at all necessary that the fair one should be sunburned and high-coloured, the only characteristics. The blown herring, a herring slightly cured for speedy use and home consumption. Those which are intended for exportation or long keeping undergo the operation of 3 successive fires, each kept up for about 24 hours. Intervals of 2 or 3 days are allowed between the smokings, in which the fat of the fish is drained away. The blown fish are smoked but once. That process has the effect of plumping them without discharging the fat, somewhat like the baking or roasting of apples. In this state of superior richness and flavour, they will not bear long keeping. On some parts of our coasts, a blown herring is called a towbowen. Why? They are also called bloaters, but we do not acknowledge the word. Bombays, to confound, bewilder, perplex, as if a veil were thrown before the eyes to hinder one from seeing what he is about. For example, I am right on Bombays, i.e. by the communication of some unexpected news or the proposal of some puzzling question. It is certainly connected with the word bombazine, but not in its modern sense. Anciently, it meant a fine web of cotton. This may be enough to prove our word. Bone lazy, bone sore, bone tired. So lazy, sore, or tired that the laziness, the soreness, or the fatigue seems to have penetrated the very bones. These compound epithets are certainly very expressive. The only objection to which they can be liable seems to be that they may be thought by some too poetical for common familiar language. Well, okay, I'm going to stop there. Obviously, I'm nowhere near finished. I've not even finished the bees, but well, I've enjoyed it very much. For me, the time has flown by, and so it's something I would very much like to come back to, possibly in the next couple of days or whenever I get time. I know in the past 2 podcasts have been uploaded on a Sunday. And yet, if people have enjoyed this little reading, I hope nobody will mind if I make them a little more regular and I can put them on whenever I have time. So, as I say, all the other podcasts have been about 20 minutes. I think 20 minutes is about the right time that you can be expected to stand listening to my voice. And I hope you found it interesting. It's something that, like I say, I will come back to in time. I've been looking through my book collection. I've got quite a few books on Suffolk and quite a few East Anglian magazines as well. So there may be some more material which I can intersperse these podcasts with. But no, as I say, the East Anglian and Suffolk dialect has always been something that's fascinated me a great deal. I've enjoyed reading from this book today. I hope you've enjoyed listening. So that's something that I'll definitely come back to in time. So like I say, I hope you've enjoyed the podcast today. Send me a follow in the comments, send me a follow, send me a comment, tell me what you think, and I'll see you all next time. And I promise I will try to make these podcasts a little more frequent and a little more regular next time. Okay, thank you very much, and shall look forward to chatting to you all, presenting for you all next time.